Good morning everyone, this is Dr. Krishnan.K, and in today's session we will be discussing about the superficial muscles in the front of the forearm. They are otherwise called as the superficial flexor group of muscles. So here there is a simple diagram representing the flexor compartment, and that too particularly the superficial group. So why it is called the superficial group? Because the flexor group of muscles are arranged in such a way that they are divided into two layers. They are collectively called as the flexor group of muscles, but the muscles in the front of the forearm may be divided into a superficial group which lies superficially and a deep group which is lying deep. So the superficial group is composed of 5 muscles while the deep group consists of 3 muscles. So in today's session we will be discussing only about the superficial group that includes the superficial 5 muscles. So let's see which are these 5 muscles. So here in this diagram you can see like 5 muscles colored in different colors. The first one in an orange color, then the second one in the blue color, then the third one in the red color, then the fourth one in a like light brown color, and the last one or the fifth one in the purple color. So these are the 5 muscles which composes the superficial flexor group of muscles. So let's name each of them. So the first one is the pronator teres, and from the name itself you can identify the action of this muscle. It helps in the pronation of the forearm. Then we have the flexor carpi radialis. So you should remember that all these muscles are either named as per their action, or it is like explained on the basis of this action as well as the attachments. So flexor carpi radialis. So what will be the action? It helps in the flexion of the wrist joint, and that is called as the flexor carpi radialis, and it is called radialis because it's overlying the bone, the radius. So this particular flexor muscle, the superficial flexor muscle, is lying over the radius bone, so it has got the name flexor carpi radialis. Then we have the palmaris longus. So the palm you already know, the palm of the hand. So palmaris longus is a muscle which is having a long tendon which will end up here in this particular point which I am pointing right now, and you can see some green color transverse lines, right? They represents the flexor retinaculum. There are some deep fascia modification fibers which will hold together all these particular tendons of these muscles, but the palmaris longus will run above it. That is the difference from all other superficial group of muscles for the palmaris longus. Then we have the flexor digitorum superficialis muscle and the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle. So the flexor digitorum superficialis means the flexor group muscle which is attached to the digits. That's why it has got the name flexor digitorum. Then the flexor carpi ulnaris, it lies over the ulna bone which is lying below this particular muscle. Hence it has got the name the flexor carpi ulnaris. So these are the names of the 5 muscles. So let's see like how to memorize them very easily. The location itself will be confusing, right? So here I have represented it with a hand dipped in 5 different colors. So just imagine that one over in the diagram, this is your left hand, and keep your left hand over your right hand in such a way that the root of the palm here, this region should be coming over the medial epicondyle region of the right forearm. Then keep the fingers spread in this particular format. So your thumb, which is directed slightly laterally, will be the position where the pronator teres is present. So the thumb represents the pronator teres, then the index finger represents the flexor carpi radialis which lies above the radius bone. Then the middle finger represents the palmaris longus. Then we have the ring finger which represents the flexor digitorum superficialis, and the last one, the little finger, represents the flexor carpi ulnaris. So this is the easy way to remember the location of these 5 muscles. Keep your left palm over the right forearm, particularly the root of the palm should be located on the medial epicondyle side, and spread your fingers and then start explaining the muscles one by one. Thumb represents pronator teres, then the index finger represents the flexor carpi radialis, middle finger the palmaris longus, the ring finger the flexor digitorum superficialis, and the little finger, the flexor digitorum, flexor, carpi, ulnaris. So these are the 5 muscles. So let's see each of these muscles in detail. So the first thing that you have to remember is the common flexor origin. So all these muscles are the flexor group of muscles, right? So all these flexor group of muscles have a common point of origin, that is from the front of the medial epicondyle of the humerus. So it's easy to remember, right? For any of these 5 muscles, you can write the origin as the common flexor origin. So that defines the origin part. But still there are a few differences that we'll be discussing when I just take up each muscles individually. So here the first one, that is the pronator teres muscle. So this orange color one is the pronator teres muscle. What will be the origin point? The common flexor origin. That is the easy way. And also a part of this particular muscle is arising from the medial side of coronoid process of the ulna. So that is the slight difference that I have told you. If you don't remember the particular separate origin of this muscle, then you just write it as the common flexor origin. That will also define the answer. So it is not that tough to remember. Then we will study the insertion point of this particular muscle. So it is inserted to the midpoint of the lateral side of the shaft of the radius. So here you can see the radius, which is having an upper end, then there is a lower end, and there is a shaft. So the midpoint of the shaft here on the lateral border, on the lateral side of the middle point of the shaft of radius will give insertion for the pronator teres muscle. So that defines the insertion point. And what will be the action? We have already told in the previous slide that the pronator teres, as the name suggests, it helps in the pronation of the forearm. Then we have to see the nerve supply. And nerve supply is nothing but the median nerve. And how the median nerve is formed? It is formed by 2 nerve roots arising from the lateral cord and medial cord of brachial plexus. The lateral root of median nerve and the medial root of median nerve. And then it will be supplying the pronator teres muscle. Then we have the blood supply. The blood supply of this pronator teres muscle is formed by the ulnar artery and the anterior ulnar recurrent artery. Then we have the second muscle, that is the flexor carpi radialis, and the flexor carpi radialis originates from the medial epicondyle of the humerus. That is nothing but the common flexor origin. So this is the point, that is the common flexor origin. And the insertion of flexor carpi radialis is the palmar surfaces of the bases of the second and third metacarpal bones. So here it will come down and finally it gets inserted to the palmar surfaces of base of the second and third metacarpal bones. Remember, there are 5 metacarpal bones. The first one representing the thumb, then we have the index finger metacarpal, then the middle finger metacarpal. Like that, there are 5 metacarpal bones. So the second and the third metacarpal bones bases will be the attaching point or the insertion point of flexor carpi radialis. Then we have the action. What will be the action? It's a flexor group. So obviously it flexes the wrist and it helps in the abduction of the hand. What is abduction of the hand? Have you thought about it? This is the medial side or the radial side of the hand. So what do you mean by abduction? You try to abduct the hand. The abduction of the hand is possible by this particular muscle. Then we have the nerve supply, that is nothing but the median nerve, and the blood supply by the ulnar artery. So you can remember they have common blood supply and almost common nerve supply. So you don't have to get confused, and it has got a common origin also. So it's very easy to remember, right? Then we have the third muscle, that is the palmaris longus. As I've told you, the red color represents the palmaris longus, and it is a short bellied muscle with a long tendon, and finally it will just get attached here on the distal half of the flexor retinaculum. I have told you about a green structure here. That is called the flexor retinaculum, and that we will be studying in detail afterwards. So just remember that is a band-like deep fascia modification which holds all these muscle tendons together. Otherwise it will slip off, right? So it is held together tightly by this particular retinaculum. And the palmaris longus is attached to the distal half of the flexor retinaculum, and then it will spread out. You can see a fan-like structure here. that is nothing but an aponeurotic extension of this palmaris longus tendon. You know what is aponeurosis, right? It is a flattened tendon. So the aponeurosis will be spread across the palmar surface of hand, and that palmar aponeurosis is the other attachment of this palmaris longus tendon. So here you can see a conical projection part of the palmar aponeurosis, that is called the apex of palmar aponeurosis. So it is attached to the distal half of the transverse, like the flexor retinaculum, as well as the apex of the palmar aponeurosis. So this defines the origin and insertion of palmaris longus. Then what about the nerve supply? As we already told, it is nothing but the median nerve, and the blood supply is by the ulnar artery. Then the next muscle is the flexor digitorum superficialis. It is an important muscle to remember. As I have told you earlier, it helps in the flexion of the digits. Which all digits? The medial 4 digits except the thumb. So the origin of this flexor digitorum superficialis is from 2 heads. Here you can see 2 heads of origin are there. The one head is arising from the humero-ulnar head, that is the common flexor tendon. Then we have the radial head, that is from the middle 1/3 of the radius. So from here, and also apart from the interosseous membrane also will give origin for this particular muscle fibers. And these muscle fibers will come down, and finally it splits up into 4 muscular tendons. So here you can see the green color represents the tendons. So as it reaches the tendon, that it will divide into 4 parts or 4 tendons, which will be supplying each digits. This one is the second digit, third, fourth and fifth. And you can see it runs downwards, and as it reaches the proximal phalanx, so here is the metacarpal 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and after that you can see the proximal phalanx, middle phalanx and finally the distal phalanx. There will be 3 phalanges, the proximal phalanx, middle phalanx and the distal phalanx. That is how the fingers are composed. So the tendons will reach the proximal phalanx, then it will divide into 2. There is a medial slip that is going towards the little finger side, and there is a radial slip. So it comes down and divides into 2 slips. As you can see here, there is a medial slip and a lateral slip, and these 2 slips will get inserted to the lateral and medial sides of the middle phalanx respectively. So the tendons will come down, and as it reaches the proximal phalanx, it splits into 2, the medial and lateral as slips that will be inserted to the middle phalanx. Then we have the flexor carpi ulnaris. Then the flexor carpi ulnaris, it is also having 2 heads of origin. There is a humeral head from the medial epicondyle of humerus, that is the common flexor origin. Then we have the ulnar head, which is formed from the medial margin of the olecranon process of ulna, and it is inserted into the pisiform bone, and its pull is transmitted through 2 ligaments. So here it will come and get inserted to the pisiform bone. There is no much things to remember. It will attach to the pisiform bone, which is one among the carpal bone, and later it will send off 2 ligaments in order to transmit the particular pull, and they are called as the pisohamate and pisometacarpal ligaments. So as the name suggests, they are connecting the pisiform bone to that of the hamate, and the pisometacarpal connects the pisiform bone to the metacarpal ligaments. So these are the 2 ligaments. Then we have the action of the flexor carpi ulnaris. It flexes the wrist and adducts the hand. It flexes the wrist and adducts the hand because it is drawing the hand towards the body, and hence it is called as the adductor of hand. Then we have the nerve supply. Here the flexor carpi ulnaris is the only superficial muscle which is having another nerve supply, that is nothing but the ulnar nerve. Then we have the blood supply by the ulnar artery. So this concludes the basic idea about the 5 muscles of flexor compartment, and particularly